Thank you very much for attending this evening. My name is Ralph Johnson. I'm the Executive Director of the Burton K. Wheeler Center for Public Policy. And we certainly appreciate your attendance this evening. I have a couple of quick thank yous to do. First of all, this conference has been generously supported by the Humanities for Montana. And they gave us a generous grant to support this specific conference. In addition, we have sponsors that help us throughout the entire year with our conferences. They are Exergy Development Group, and Jim, are you here? Karkulis, is he still here? He had to leave. Northwest Energy, Claudia and Michael, here, thank you. And then PPL and DA Davidson. So we owe a great deal of thanks to their support for our efforts. Tonight, we've also been hosted, both tonight and throughout tomorrow, by the University of Montana's School of Journalism. And Peggy Kerr has been a wonderful help in putting together our program. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Peggy to introduce our speaker tonight. Peggy.
Great, thank you. And I guess I go without microphone.
Yeah.
I'm just going to get right to the point. Thank all of you for being so patient. And there's a reason that School of Journalism has a broadcast department and really great faculty and staff who work there and students. It's because when we can't get into the podium or the lectern to find a mic, they've already figured that out about an hour ahead of time. I'm so sorry you had to wait for our speaker. But I think I want to thank the Burton K. Wheeler Center for having a speaker tonight in the day-long conference on the news media and issues involving the news media. I personally can think of no issue that I think is more critical to the state than how we promote and preserve and engage and inform citizenry. And I can think of no one who would be more interesting to talk to us about the state of the news media today and in the future than our speaker tonight, Chris Peck. Chris is the editor of the Commercial Appeal in Memphis, Tennessee, and that's his day job. The other thing that he does is he is co-founder of Journalism That Matters, or JTM, which I would say is the most innovative organization around today, think tank brainstorming group that is looking at our new news ecosystem, as we like to talk about it. Chris was born into a newspaper family in Wyoming, so he's kind of got news media ever since the first day on this planet. His father, Bob Peck, and his father's brother bought the newspaper in Riverton, Wyoming in 1949. And today, Chris's brother, Stephen, is publisher of the Riverton Ranger, and Chris continues to have an active interest in that newspaper as well. He tells me that his first job in the news business was when he was 11 years old, and that was when he was asked to be a janitor, sweeping up the lead filings from underneath the linotype machine. How things have changed. Chris attended Stanford University, where he had a major in communications and a minor in Eastern European Studies. He did work at the Stanford Daily newspaper for the 4 years while he was there, and says that, you know, in the 60s, a lot of the news they were covering was all kinds of protests, demonstrations, and lots of fun and games in California. His newspaper career after college took him to Haley, Idaho, where he was editor of the Wood River Journal, and then to Twin Falls, Idaho, where he worked for the Times News as city editor and then managing editor, and from there on to Spokane, Washington. He was in Spokane for almost 20 years and started out as a columnist at the Spokesman Review, and very quickly moved into the managing editor's role, and then very quickly moved into the editor's role. During his tenure at the Spokesman Review, the newspaper was cited as among the 25 best newspapers in the country. And I think at that time there were about 1,700 newspapers, and the Spokesman Review was among the 2 smallest newspapers that were even accorded that kind of ranking. And the people who were looking at these newspapers said it is because this is a newspaper that takes on the big, important issues of the day in its region and beyond. Chris has been very active over the years nationally. He served on the board and then was president of the Associated Press Managing Editors Organization. He is a founder of the National Credibility Roundtables Project, which put on a credibility roundtable in each of the 50 states and beyond as a means of getting newsrooms to open up conversations with the public about major issues that citizens thought were credibility concerns in their communities. He also is now a member of the board of the American Society of News Editors. He joined the Commercial Appeal in 2002. Before that, right after leaving the Spokesman Review, he was the Belo Chair, the Belo Distinguished Chair in Journalism at Southern Methodist University, but quickly could not take the academic life, had to get back into the newsroom, and has been in Memphis since late 2002. Now, Chris was my boss at the Spokesman Review for the years I was there, and so I really could tell you an awful lot of stories about him. We had, those newsroom offices, they're glass boxes, so it's all windows, and there was but a window that separated us for my 16 years there. And but I'm going to tell you one story. I remember a company retreat, and so we were off campus, so to speak, and they're all the newspaper managers, and Chris was asked to talk about what else? The future of news. And I remember very clearly, kind of walked up to the front of the group, had this bag, and reached in the bag, and he pulled out a hammer and a box of red Jell-O. And he said, figuring out the future of news is kind of like nailing Jell-O to the wall, which he then proceeded to do with the box. Well, here we are in 2009, and I know that working journalists, journalism educators and students, and members of the public who are vitally interested in news media and informed citizenry are still trying to figure out how to nail Jell-O to the wall. And I don't think that Chris has brought his hammer and his props, but I do think that tonight we are going to get some intriguing and interesting and really far-sighted views about news media today and where they're headed. And so with that, I'd like to have you join me in welcoming Chris to UM and to Montana.
And thank you for welcoming me to Montana. I'm really enjoying it. And I really think if this newspaper business doesn't work out, that first job I had as janitor, if you look on the charts, there's a lot of need for that. So if the stuff I talk about tonight doesn't go anywhere, I've got something to fall back on. And I want to say that, the topic tonight is to kind of talk about whether there's a crisis in journalism in Montana and in journalism as a whole. And I would say that you're lucky in that you have Peggy Coor here as the Dean of the University of Montana's Journalism School. And whatever happens in terms of the platform of journalism or the way it goes, your future journalists are in very good hands. And I'm really pleased that Peggy was able to come back home to Montana, and I have great confidence in her ability to navigate through this future. It's really going to be an exceptional period for students who are here, so they're lucky to have Peggy. And I also want to say something on behalf of the Wheeler Center and Ralph Johnson and Julie Hitchcock, who helped me get here, but also the board of the Wheeler Center. The idea that you're going to take your time and money to talk about critical issues in the state of Montana is really remarkable. We need that, a lot of critical issues, we know that. But the fact that you're going to invest some effort into trying to sort these issues through. And one of the things I learned in sort of the cocktail party before, I was talking to Hillary Wheeler Smith, I guess it is, who was a granddaughter or great-granddaughter?
Great-granddaughter.
great-granddaughter of B.K. Wheeler, and I guess is it Bradley Snow, right? That's the other who was also as a Wheeler. Well, one of the things I learned in talking with them and others that B.K. thought there was real magic in getting people together. I think the phrase I heard, there's no problem too big to be solved by people if they just get around the table together and try to work it out. And that idea is something that was sorely needed in this country right now. And the fact that you're all involved in an institution and a center that's trying to do that really speaks well of Montana and of the Wheeler Center. So thank you for letting me have one tiny little part of that this evening. Our topic tonight is failure to inform. Is there a looming media crisis in Montana? I can see it on CNN or Fox right now, you know. Can't you hear the music playing? I mean, you know, it's just with the big booming drum, you know, failure. You know, I can see it. And in fact, it's true. You know, earlier this afternoon, I was speaking with, I think it's Sally, is it Mock at KUFM, the public television station here in Missoula. And her first question to me, she said, well, Mr. Peck, do you think the sky is falling when it comes to media? And I said, Sally, the sky's already down. The birds are on the ground and the stars are crashed into the ground in terms of traditional media. I mean, the things that have happened in the last 5 years alone are really stunning. And I want to start there so we kind of know what's going on. But to not put too fine a point on it, but in the newspaper industry where I'm working, newspapers have lost 90% of their profit in 5 years. The paper that I work for, to give you an idea, has gone from a place where in 2005 it made $50 million profit. This year it'll make $1 million, and that's after we've cut the staff by 50%. So that's a pretty good example of the sky is falling if you're in the business world. But you know, and then there's some other piece of the sky that have kind of fallen here too. If you've been following sort of what some of the research has been on how the general public perceives the media, the Pew Center for People in the Press just about 10 days ago released their research on what people's perception is of the press, and what you discovered is only 29% of Americans think that what they read in the paper or see on TV is accurate. 29%. And about 60% feel that the media, however you want to define it, are politically biased. And I guess that would be another example of sky falling, you know, birds and stars on the ground and so forth. But there's a part of it, and while those things are bad enough, I mean, I wouldn't get up in the morning and say, wow, another great day. I mean, there's some bad things. But the one that really gets me was this recent National Geographic survey where it was talking about young people and our future, and the fact that how are we doing in terms of educating a new generation of Americans, of citizens, of voters, of taxpayers on what's going on in the world. And so the question that the Geographic asked, it says, all right, now, we have a war going on in what 2 countries? That was the response. More than 60% of the young people could not identify the war in Iraq or the war in Afghanistan. They had no idea. And so then, of course, Geographic, you know, loving geography, said, okay, well, here's a map. Here's a map of the world. We've told you where the countries are. You didn't know where the wars were. Would you find them on the map? 75%, 3 out of 4, had no idea where either Iraq or Afghanistan were on the map. And then, on top of that, they said, okay, well, let's go back to something you do know. Let's go back to Hurricane Katrina. And they said, all right, now, if Hurricane Katrina were coming to your area, and here's the map, and what you have to do is evacuate to the north and the west. Where would that be on the map? Where's the north and where's the west? And again, a vast majority of young people could not identify north or west. So when you put that all together, and you're saying, well, how are we doing in terms of educating a future generation about what it takes to be a good citizen, what it takes to stay up on the world, sort of, you know, making sure we kind of know what's going on, you know, it gives you pause. It definitely gives you pause. And so I think by that measure, it would be fair to say that, to use a highly technical phrase, we may be educating a bunch of dumbasses in this country. You know, Montana, that's a highly technical phrase. You know, when you hear a dumbass, you know what I'm talking about, right? But I didn't come all the way out here. To simply say we're in deep doo-doo, because I do think there are some signs there, that we've got some work to do. But really, statistics don't tell all the story. And I'm reminded, there's one piece on my resume that I don't often use. But my first newspaper job actually wasn't in Haley, Idaho. My first newspaper job was in Red Lodge, Montana. And I dropped out of college for a year to take this job because my dad and his brother decided to expand their vast newspaper empire and bought this little paper, the Carbon County News in Red Lodge. And I was 20 years old. And it was 1970. And it was the first Earth Day, if you remember. So I remember going out in the prairie there between Red Lodge and sort of up just the foot of the Beartooth Mountains, looking for examples of environmental degradation. And all I could find was an old broken down, rusted Model A. So I took this picture with my camera and ran this big photo. And isn't it horrible that you've got this rusted Model A sitting out there in the middle of nowhere in Montana? And the very soon after that, I was sitting in the bar across the street from the Wood River Journal, the Snag. I don't know if the Snag is still there, but it was a going concern then. And it reminded me what statistics don't tell you. So I'm sitting there in the bar after getting the paper out, and there's this old crusty Montana guy there, and he taught me two important things. The first one was what a red deer was. See, if you weren't in Montana, I can tell you living in Tennessee, have no idea what a red beer. You go into the bar, and they say, I want a red beer, and they look at you and say, huh? I say, you put a shot of tomato juice in there. They say, you're not from around here, are you? That's what they say. Now, at the same time, they taught me about mint juleps, which is another story. But back to the Snag. And I'm thinking about statistics. I'm sitting there at the bar, and this old guy says, you know something? And I thought the proper answer was, no, I don't know anything. You know something? No, what? You know Americans walk 900 miles a year? I said, really? No, I didn't know that. Yeah, they do. 100 miles. And you know what else? And again, not wanting to show off having an education. No, I don't know anything else. And you know what? They drink about 22 gallons of alcohol a year. I said, is that right? He says, yeah. So that means we get 41 miles per gallon. Well, it's a good story. The statistic is true, but what the hell does it have to do with Earth Day? It had nothing to do. But it gets back to the point that what you want to look at underneath the statistics. And I think all those things that I cited, which are certainly are disturbing, don't tell the whole story. So I want to sort of lay a foundation for what I think is a little brighter picture for the media, and then I want to get to some things that I think are really important right now, not just in Montana, but for the nation as far as what's going on. But the first thing to remember about what you see in the media right now is that actually there are plenty of people who still want to read newspapers. That really isn't our problem. And an interesting fact that Arthur Sulzberger Jr., the publisher of the New York Times, recently shared at a staff meeting with the Boston Globe when they were having some labor troubles, big labor troubles. But one of the things that he said was, in the last 2 years, the number of people who have signed on as subscribers to the Boston Globe, people who said, I'll subscribe to the paper for at least 2 years or more, is up to about 800,000. And it was only 600,000 3 years ago. So actually, the number of people who say, it was with the New York Times. He was talking about the Times. The number of people who said, I'm going to read and pay you for the New York Times for 2 years has gone from 600,000 to 800,000 just in the last 3 or 4 years. It's a very good sign. I mean, there's a core of people, many of you in this room, frankly, who at some point had the habit of drinking a cup of coffee and reading the big screen with all that. That became a habit early in your life, and you stuck with it. So I think that's a very good thing. There's another piece that's really important. Newspaper websites have about 70 million viewers today. So if I go back 10 years ago, really, there wasn't any such thing as a news. Well, maybe a little longer, maybe 15 years ago, there was no such thing as newspaper websites. So there's a whole new audience that's grown up of people, my daughter being one, lives in Boston, doesn't read the Boston Globe, but reads Boston.com religiously. She stays up on things. She reads commercialappeal.com religiously. So I think there's something there that I think is you can build on that's really very important. And I think the other thing that I think is I find some hope in. If you look at the ranking of the top news sites, there's companies that do that. You can measure everything online. So they've done that. They'll rank the top 20 sites where people go for news. Matt Drudge is number 2. So we'll have to put that up there. He's ahead of other names that you've known. But in the top 20, about half of the websites were people who don't ever read newspapers or really watch much of TV news. When they go, they're going to legacy named companies, CNN, New York Times, Gannett News Group, for their news online. So when you put that all together, I think what it says is there's an audience for news. There's people, we're social beings, we're curious beings, we want to know what's going on in the world, and even with all of the decay that we've talked about and all the intrusion and all that, there is still an audience for news. And then going back to those kids who couldn't find Afghanistan on the map, they don't think it's a problem, do they? If you have young kids, the fact that they couldn't find Afghanistan on a map doesn't matter. And why doesn't it matter to them? They said, if I needed to know, what would I do? I'd Google it, right? Why do I need to invest all those brain cells now to learn all that stuff? If I need something to know, I'll just Google it, and there it will be. And I think that's a mindset. I mean, I think they're not looking at this as being dumbasses. They're just saying, no, I know how to Google, so what's the problem? You know? And so I think you put all those things together, and I think that you could say, well, maybe there's something building there. Maybe there's something building there, something to build on that gives us a future. And that's what I wanted to talk a little bit about. And I think that the reason I think that we need to talk about this, I mean, let's go back to who cares anyway? I mean, newspapers made a whole lot of money. They were built on the printing press. Maybe their time has come and gone. Maybe television news, we had three channels, you know, ABC, NBC, CBS. Maybe their time is gone. What's wrong with 600 channels? What's wrong with doing it all online? And I think that's when you kind of go back to what Senator Wheeler talked about. And there's the famous quote that is on, I don't know if it's on every piece of literature. Every piece that you guys sent me had it on it. I don't know if it's on everyone, but you know, and I'll read it for you. You've probably heard it, but it says, an informed people are the basis of and a necessity for successful democratic government. The people of the United States are entitled to hear all sides of a question, whether it be political, economic, social, racial, or religious. Okay, so if the democratic government, that it really is this nation's gift to the world, if it depends upon an informed citizenry, if those two work like that, that's why the future of journalism really matters. I mean, honestly, it doesn't really have anything to do with the print. It doesn't really have anything to do with the broadcast. But somewhere, somebody's got to put something in your mind that says, I'm going to vote Obama or I'm going to vote McCain-Palin. I'm going to support the Freedom for Firearms Act in Montana, or I'm not. I'm going to go for a property tax increase, or I'm not. I mean, something has to inform you. You're going to get asked these questions in this country. How are you going to make a decision? I mean, it's really, I think that's really kind of the basis of it. Okay, so the problem then that we've got really comes down to, I think, something a little bit different than what a lot of people think of. The problem is the very proliferation of media and of access to media has overwhelmed our feeble primate brains, to be very honest with you. If you do the research on what's going on in the world of how we all think, to be honest, we cannot keep up with all the information that is available. See, Google, if you've heard the Google pitch about what is Google's reason for being? Does anybody know? Do you remember what their reason for being is? It's really brilliant, and it's really to the point. It is to make all of the information of the world available to every single person on Earth. That's their business plan and a mission. All right, all the information in the world available to every single person. All right, imagine that. Imagine your little brain. It's not a big brain, but I mean, I'll imagine my little brain trying to get around the idea I can have all the information in the world available to me. I mean, it would be completely overwhelming. And that really is the problem that we're truly grappling with, I mean, among others. But I want to start there. I had a real epiphany on this just in the last month, after many years of having basic cable. My wife said, I don't want basic cable anymore. All it has on is ESPN Sports. I want something more to watch. So for our wedding anniversary, our 32nd wedding anniversary, I say, okay, we'll get Premier Cable. okay? Premier cable, you'll have so, it's just perfect there. I'm thinking, what do I want to, I'm not sure it's a good thing for marriage at that point, say, here, watch more TV. I'm not sure that was good. But anyway, that's the decision I made, and off we went. Okay, but so for a month now, I've been sitting on the couch. And I always read the TV guide in the paper to show you what a truggle that I was. Well, okay, so now you're sitting on the couch and you got the little clicker, right? And if you've not had the little clicker, if you haven't had cable and you're sitting there, you're going like this, channel 495, cooking with Brussels sprouts, and 496, cooking with tofu, and 497, cooking with tofu and Brussels sprouts. It just goes on and on, there's just so much that you just cannot, I can't make any sense of it at all. I don't watch any TV. All I watch is the scroll of all the things I could be watching. But let me talk a little bit about how that reflects, I think, to the problem that we've got. And I'll go back to my earliest days when I was the janitor at the little newspaper in Wyoming back in 1961. That's a long time ago now, but in 1961, you had ABC, NBC, CBS. That's what you had, right? And if you remember that, or if your parents remember that, that's all you had on TV. And on top of that, basically, most towns had a newspaper, and most people read it. Back in that day, 7 out of 10 adults read the newspaper that existed in each town. And so the combination of that did a couple of things that we never think about, but actually aided this whole democratic process. It had a lot of problems, but it really aided the democratic process, because what it meant was we basically all had to see the same stuff. You had to watch Walter Cronkite. Well, that's what you had. So, everybody watched it, and that's the way that you thought the world worked. Or you read your little newspaper, whatever it was, and that's what the information was that you knew other than you had around the block. So, in a weird way, it created a sense of shared information, and also, to some extent, a shared community, because that's all you had. And what's interesting about it is every community then basically had access to the 3 channels, and then it had a few journalists. And Montana is a great example of that. Every town had a little newspaper, and all the journalists, they were kind of spotty. They weren't all that great. But they at least were out there doing the professional thing, or trying to be the professional thing that people do. And that's what they were kind of shoe leather intellectuals who went around and dug things up and sat through the boring meetings and wrote it all down. And it was kind of dull, really. A lot of it was really chicken dinner, but it was very local. It was about my city council meeting, or what was going on, who was being fired at the church in this town, or what was happening with the sports teams right there. And that's all you had, those few people who were paying attention, poor little bastards out there late at night getting paid $12 an hour to sit through city council meetings and write up a little story, and you got it. And sometimes you read it. That's just the way it worked. And so what you have now is very different than that. What you have now in your lives is very different than that. You've got 600 channels. Okay, that's part of what you've got. But it's much more, even more profound, because it used to be that somebody somewhere in the town had the printing press. And now everybody has got a laptop and a digital camera. And by golly, the whole idea of being a journalist and a publisher just sounds too good, and a lot of them are doing it. They're just, how many blogs are there in the world now? I think it's something like, 70 million? Everybody's got a blog, basically. Now, most people only have 3 people to read their blog. The boyfriend, their mom, and a distant cousin who lives in Montana. But nonetheless, everybody is taking a little bite of it. And that's changed the way, that's eroded that old model that we described, right? With the 3 channels in the paper. It's all eating away. It's little ducks, taking little bites out of it. But there's a much bigger factor that's eroding that old model that's much more serious than all this sort of journalistic thing that we've got to talk about. Not only has the 3 channels and the newspaper sort of been eroded by all the people with the blogs and the 600 channels, but the old economic underpinnings that kept that all going has all but disappeared. And this is really when you talk about the crisis in Montana, that's really more serious at this point than in terms of the viability of the media here than anything else. Because what's happened is that the way that you paid for those few journalists that worked in your town depended upon what? Where did the money, you paid a little bit for the paper, if you subscribed to the paper. But it was a very little bit, and your TV basically came for free. Remember that? TV didn't have a cable bill. But there was still money coming in to pay the journalists. Why? Because you had department stores in your town, locally owned department stores, and they advertised. You had car dealers in your town. If you wanted to buy a car, they would advertise. And the realtors, if they wanted to sell a house, they would advertise in the paper. And the help wanted, if somebody had a job, they would advertise in the paper. And all of that decision-making was local, and the ownership was local, and the only place you could go was the 3 networks or your little local newspaper, so that's where all the money went. And there was a golden era there from about 1960 to really right up into about 2000, where there was a whole lot of money made in the media because of that, because that's where all the dollars went. Well, all the dollars aren't going there anymore. They're not going there. Where are they going? Where are they going? Well, you open up your mailbox and you got all those circulars, first of all, that they send you that aren't in the newspaper anymore. They just send them to your house. That's one place they're going. Has anybody here ever gone to, I don't know, how big is Craigslist in Montana? Is there Craigslist in Montana? I don't know if it's here or not. Okay, but if it's here, let me tell you, if you're can sit in Missoula, Montana and buy a boat or you know, look for a job or find a babysitter on Craigslist, you know what I'm talking about. Didn't pay any money. That all used to be in the newspaper. The car dealers are all owned by 5 or 6 big companies that market directly. They have a very tight budget. I don't know if they're local. I don't know enough about the market here, but I know there were local department stores in Missoula. Are there any left now, or are they all? Is it all Macy's and Dillard's? I don't know that. But I just say if it's whatever it was, that the contraction on the business side has been very, very profound. Here's the statistic that I think boggles people. As recently, when I was going back to like 2005, when the paper I worked for was making all the money, half of that money all came from classified advertising. That's help wanted ads, it's real estate ads, and then little liner ads from car companies and so forth. And then people just selling stuff. All that's gone. That business has gone from probably being something to $50 to $60 million in Memphis down to $2 or $3 million this year. And it was the most profitable business that the newspapers had. The same thing's happened in Montana. Although I looked at the Missoulian today and it has some classified, but I can guarantee you that the shrinkage of the dollars they have coming in has dramatically affected the staff. I don't know if there's anybody from the Missoulian here tonight. Sherry Devlin, who's the editor, was someone that Peggy and I worked with in Spokane, and she's a very talented person, has a tough job. I can tell you that her staff in the last 5 years has shrunk a minimum of 30%, probably more if you really look at it. And that's the direct result of the dollar shrinking down. Okay, so now you put that together with what we described, the 600 channels, the people on their blogging on the internet, plus the fact that the mainstream media have lost all this revenue. What that has done is shrunk down that little group of people in Missoula, in Billings, in Great Falls that used to go out and sit at all those meetings and report all that local news for you. There just aren't as many feet on the street because journalism is very labor intensive, and that labor, actually, and I want to say one good thing here about what's happened. Most companies have tried very hard to shield their newsrooms from the worst of the cuts. I mean, the people in the advertising, production, support, they've been whacked. And the idea has been to try to protect the news, but there's no protection. In order to stay in business, the mainstream newspapers in towns like Missoula have had to cut their expenses by 40 to 50%, or they'd be out of business. They wouldn't be able to make payroll. Okay, so that's where we are. Let me talk about you, all of you, for a minute. What's this meant in your lives? Well, you've been freed in some ways. You used to be tethered to the 3 channels in your local paper, and you didn't know it, but that's where you all had to go, and everybody went there, and it was, there was a power relationship that really wasn't that good. I mean, a lot of the media were kind of haughty and arrogant about it because we've got you, by golly. You know, we're the only source of information, we know it, and there's where you are. And so we didn't do you a big favor by pretending like we were, you know, more than we were, but we did that. So we were, and as a consequence, that engendered a certain amount of resentment. So when you could free yourself, not everybody, but some people say, aha, free at last from those media SOBs who were always condescending and telling me the way the world was. But there's a problem. There's a problem with that. There's a problem with that. Because what that has tended to do, that has been one reason among some other important ones, while the sense that we're all kind of part of a community has kind of freed a little bit. You don't see it, I don't think you see it as much in Missoula probably as you do in other parts of the country, because you don't have big suburbs, you don't have huge disparities between rich and poor. You have some, but it's not like where I live, where 40% of the people are living in poverty. You don't have huge racial divisions, some, but not as bad as it is in other parts of the world. But you put together the fact there's this tremendous income disparity, some very deep lingering racial problems, some big political schisms that people on both sides, liberal and conservative, have played upon, and the fact that there isn't as much holding you together as there once was, and everybody's kind of scattered and fractured and fragmented. And you know what I'm talking about. You see it all the time in all aspects of our life. And this fragmentation has been exacerbated by the fact that the mainstream media don't have their grip. You don't have to go there anymore. So you're at a place now where it's very easy to get very different views of the world but basically look at the same set of facts. I mean, Fox News would be a great example of that. And let me say first that Fox is a brilliant business model. It really is. And I don't think anyone should ever deny that Murdoch and Roger Ailes, the people who run Fox, really were not brilliant at what they've done. Because what they did was anticipate the fragmentation and the breaking apart that we talked about in the media, and said, okay, what we need to do is identify a niche. We're going to identify a niche that we think we can own. And if we can own it, there's money to be made, and boy, is there money to be made. Fox News, in case you didn't know, is the #1 most trusted medium in this country right now. #1 most trusted. Fox News is also the #1 most distrusted medium. And you think about it, that's exactly as it plays out on the basis of what we've been talking about, right? We don't have the 3, we got the 600 channels. You're fragmented, and you're going to go find a fragment that you can build a business on. And they've done it brilliantly. They really have. They've got it. And you know, if you have people, maybe the Fox viewers in here, I'm not asking anybody to take a litmus test up, but you know one of the key elements of that model is only watch Fox because we're telling you the way it is. That's what they say. And why is that? Well, every person that they lose to CNN or MSNBC or somewhere else is a person that's dropping in their ratings. It's not. Honestly, I don't think it's driven terribly by ideology. I think the ideology they've identified and say there's an audience of people that we can get them really passionate and we can keep them, and it's a great business. So I'm not going to knock Fox for that, except to say that business model and the way it's played out has undermined and made much more difficult this idea of creating a truly informed citizenry. And why is that? Going back to Senator Wheeler's comments. Okay, why is that? Fox is not telling you get those different point of views from all different perspectives. That's not their message. Their message is exactly the opposite of that. Watch Fox. Now I think CNN to a certain extent has had to parrot that. I mean, they said, well, okay, we've got Keith Olbermann. Let's go have him try to do that. So we'll try to gather a little people around Keith Olbermann. But even Keith Olbermann doesn't say too often, let's go and try to get different points of views. So you put those two things together and you go back to, well, what's the purpose of having the journalism anyway, to keep them informed and getting a wide perspective? It's very hard to do. When you put together the disintegration, the shrinkage of the staffs, the fragmentation of the media trying to build into niches. You put all that together, and then that core purpose of why journalism mattered, because it was trying to give people the information they need from a variety of different sources, has really been under assault. has really been under assault. Okay. So there we are. There's a nice, happy way to take a little transition. So we've got to ask ourselves then, what would you do about this? And so I'm going to wrap up here by some things I think we ought to do, and then I thought maybe we ought to leave a little time for some questions here. What do you do about this? If you go back to the, to the Wheeler maxim that you have to have an informed public for democracy, and you said, boy, from hearing all that, I'd say there's a potential that democracy is in peril. There's a potential that democracy is in peril. And I think the reason is if you don't have people who are living in the common area, who are not working off the same sort of facts, have a certain amount of agreement, boy, the idea of them making good decisions or finding some consensus becomes more difficult. But not impossible. But not impossible. So I'm going to give you 10 things that I think we should do, and I think we as individuals, or some of you in the media, you ought to focus on, or some of you in public policy or in higher education, you ought to say, here's some things we ought to talk about. Okay, the first one, recognize that the shift in the media and the revolution in the media is here to stay. And what that means is, for someone like me who spent all my adult life in newspapers, forget about it. To quote Alison Krauss, it's not going back. The newspaper industry in most towns is a vital niche product. It's vital because you got rich old people. I know it's a good demographic thing. But it's not going back to the way it was. It's not going back to 3 channels. And the quicker you get in your mind to say, I've got to play in this new arena, particularly if you're in the media now, because you still have a degree of influence and you still have a degree of power. But the shift is permanent, and you got to get your mind around it. And it's really important to not spend a breath thinking about the good old days. Okay. Instead, the second point number 2, embrace the new media tools. Because living in Montana, you've heard guns don't kill people, people kill people, right? You hear it's a common thing. Well, there's an element of truth to that, right? If I don't pick up the gun and shoot you, the gun's not going to pick itself up. The same thing is true with these new media tools. They have tremendous potential to inform and educate and connect people. And you really need to say to yourself, I'm going to embrace those tools. I want to mention a couple that I think are really important right now. I think there are 2. One is, if any of you in the room have a Kindle, you'll know the basics of the e-reader. The e-reader is basically a digital device that gives you the reading experience in a digital form. So it's like you pick up a book. Well, it's kind of like picking up a book. You can read it in a digital form. Well, it's a very primitive first tool, but the potential of being able to give people that reading experience in some electronic version is very real. And it's important because it would get, if we could do it tomorrow, newspapers in particular could turn off the presses and keep your paid subscription. You could pay for a digital subscription and it'd save you tens of millions of dollars, and we could still keep you as a customer and so forth. So the e-reader has great potential, but there's only one little snag, and that is, will consumers embrace it? Because if nobody buys one, it doesn't matter how great it could be if you don't buy one. So the second and more likely digital tool that I think is going to be hugely important and needs to be embraced is right here. It's your smartphone. And mobile is much, much bigger than any other and much farther along than any of the other electronic media now. And it's, if you have kids, you know what I'm talking about. They live in this, and that's where they are. Okay. Well, can you identify who pays or where the charge comes for all that texting and all that stuff you get? It's kind of buried in your phone bill, isn't it? And unless you're reading through all the pages, it's a little bit fuzzy what exactly you're paying for. Well, that's a good thing. We'll hide the bill for news in your digital phone someday, right? We'll just make it a charge. You'll be easy. You won't be able to find it on your bill, and we're good to go. Okay, step 3, and this is a very important point, more important than it was when I was growing up. The responsibility is on your shoulders now to be media literate. It used to be on the journalist's shoulders to say, I'm going to make sure that I double check the facts and I'm going to make sure that what I give you is, is vetted and verified and so forth. There are some people out there doing that, but there's a whole lot of people who aren't doing that. If they're not doing it, you can't trust them. When that question of trust comes up, I think a lot of it is, I can't make head nor tails of this. Is this true or not true? Is this spun or not spun? Well, the answer is, you've got to put that on your shoulders now. You've got to say, I have got to learn what it means to be able to separate fact from fiction. And that's a discipline. We're not used to that, most of us. We kind of offloaded that to the traditional media. No more. You've got to be media literate. And that means, so what does being media literate means? Okay. It means you have to look for edited and verified content, is what I'd say. And because that's what journalists have done. They did two things. They took all the information in the world that Google wants to give you, they boiled the complex down to something simple and said, oh, you don't have to know it all, but let me give you 10 paragraphs and you've got it, okay? They've edited it down and made it clear. And the other thing they've done is verified. They said, we heard this, we heard that, and because they're paying me $12,000 a year, by golly, I'm going to go out and dig up and find out, relatively speaking, whether it's true or half true or something. Edited, verified content is what it means to be media literate. It doesn't mean it feels good to watch Fox or it feels good to watch CNN. No, that's their business. They want you to feel good and they don't want you to go other places. And you got to say, I'm sorry, I love you, you're really great, Bill O'Reilly, you're the greatest guy, but I'm going to go check it out on the other side. That's what being media literate means. Okay, step 4. Learn to link up with others. The erosion of the traditional media and of journalism itself. There's about 20,000 journalists have lost their jobs in the last 3 years. 20,000 people who are out gathering up news. I'm saying Missoula, like I said, I'm sure it's 30% of their staff. In Memphis, our staff is down 40%. In Spokane, where Peg and I used to work, their staff is down about 50% from 10 years ago. That's just not enough people, to be honest. We cannot cover everything we used to cover. So what are you going to do instead? You're going to link up to some other people who are doing some of the legwork. A good example of that was the University of Montana's coverage of the Grace trial here. Well, Peggy and I were talking about this just the other day. If you wanted to find out what was going on, they had students there, trained well enough to go in and sit through the trial and blog about it and let you know what was going on. That's a good thing. But you had to link to it. You had to say, well, okay, I want to learn about the trial. I can read some of the Missoulian, but I got to go find somewhere else. This idea of looking for, because you're media literate, the verified, edited content, but I'm going to link up because there are other sources. All those people out there blogging, some of them are pretty good. Some of them have enough of a passion and enough of a discipline to do right. So then you've got to learn how to do that. We used to have to know. You used to click on the TV and open up the paper. Now more. You've got to find a ways to link. So that was kind of step number 4 that would really help us. Okay. Step number 5. Yes, you do need to know what's going on in the world. So you do this whole issue of using the digital media to keep a global perspective is really important. We can go in, you and I tonight, can go to Afghanistan, we can go to Iraq, we can go to Russia, and we can find out some of what's going on in the world. That's a good thing. It didn't happen before. For most of humanity, you didn't have any idea what was going on in the rest of the world. There was no way of knowing. So it's a good thing that you can figure out, can take a global look. But the problem is, and this is where it's important, in the end, we all live someplace. We have a place we have to come home, and we have to say, well, if I live in Missoula, yeah, it's great to know about Iraq, but I live here. So you think about you learn globally, but you keep it focused on local. And the reason that's important is kind of goes to what I call the step 6, which is speak up for the shared civic values where you are. I'll give you an example of how these two things, why I got to this point. In Tennessee, the state of Tennessee allows a public list of everyone who has a permit to carry a handgun. And if you want to carry a gun in Tennessee, you have to fill out a form. And then they do a real quick little background check to make sure you're not a recent felon. But if you're not a felon, you can get a gun. Okay, and if I go to Nashville, I could look at it. Well, we decided what we would do is just put it on our website, so you didn't have to go to Nashville. You could just see it on our website. Well, a lot of people who own guns didn't like that because they thought that was an invasion of privacy, even though on the form it says this is a public forum. But what was really interesting is the people who complained about it most loudly didn't live in Tennessee. I got a lot of calls from Montana. I really did. And I got a lot of really nasty, hateful email. And so on the good side of that was Montanans were able to find out that a newspaper in Tennessee was putting the database of permit to carry online, and it incensed them. They were bothered by it. And finally I said, well, wait a minute. You live in Montana. Why? I mean, if it was your name, it'd be one thing, but it's not your name. It's somebody in Tennessee you don't know. Well, it's because you're infringing on my rights, and you shouldn't do this. Well, what they were doing is that they were plugging into this much more global view of the world, but they lost, I mean, to be honest, it was much more important, really, whether people in Tennessee cared one way or the other about it. And I would say in all of what we do, don't get so worked up about the other part of the world that you forget that you live someplace and that your real impact and the thing that you really need to do is reinforce some civic and important civic values in your local community. And there's another part of this that's important. I live on a street. I live in the South, and the South is very, there's a very strong Southern culture. My neighbor across the street, Murray Tate. I'll tell you about Murray because I see his car backing out of his driveway every day, so I can see the bumper stickers on his bumper. So he had a big McCain-Palin bumper sticker. Now, I'm a newspaper editor. I can't have a bumper sticker, but I can tell you my wife voted for Obama. I can tell you that. Okay, so he had a big McCain-Palin bumper sticker. He had a big NRA bumper sticker. He had a big Ole Miss, University of Mississippi, big Ole Miss bumper sticker. So in the course of our dealings where the newspaper endorsed Obama, we published the names of everybody who had a permit to carry a gun, and we covered the University of Memphis more than we cover Ole Miss. So as a consequence, you might think Murray across the street would have some issues. He loved guns, he loved Ole Miss, and he loved John McCain, and his neighbor across the street, he was a suspected Obama supporter, published the names of the gun owners, and his son went to the University of Memphis. But you know what? Murray is a wonderful neighbor. We're very different, our families. But he's an old, I've lived in the South 7 years, so I'm doomed. I can never be a Southerner. He's been there for 3 generations. But the point is, he's a wonderful neighbor. So when the deluge comes and Memphis gets 50 inches of rain a year, and so when it really rains, the gutter in the front of the house just overflows. And so if you take your bags of leaves out, they float down the street into Murray's yard. My leaves ended up in, Murray's never bothered. He picks up the soggy bag of leaves, he brings it over and puts it on there. He'll be out with a rake a lot of times cleaning out the gutter. He brings something to our Christmas party every day. He doesn't come to the Christmas party because he'd be liberal. But he brings something. He brings a pan. His mom brings a pan. They're really wonderful neighbors. And you know what? Because of the fact that we've got a relationship that's based on where we live, it lessens the conflict and the polarization that you feel if you only lived, as I discovered in the guns, where all I care about is guns, and I'm in Montana, and I'm going to call that friggin' editor in Tennessee to give him a piece of my mind. I don't mind getting the call. It's a part of the tool. But the point of it was, if you build those civic connections, we all know somebody who, if you voted for McCain, who voted for Obama, if you voted for Obama, who voted for McCain. We all know somebody in our own families. We all know somebody who's on different sides of abortion. We all know somebody who's on different sides of the war in Iraq, on oil, so you have to maintain those ties because it keeps us, despite the difficulties, it keeps a sense that we can keep lines of communication open. And that's really important right now. Okay, step 7. You have to nurture and support the real journalists. The real journalists. And this isn't to knock the bloggers. I'm not doing that at all. Every community needs a few people who are truly trained and committed and passionate about journalism. And think of it this way. You have a utility company that gets you the power to your house every day, right? You need the power, and you're willing to pay for that power. Journalism the same way. You need a little bit of journalism locally, and you've got to find some ways to support that. In Montana, you've got a couple of really interesting models. I mean, first of all, you've got the Missoula Independent, which is a successful alternative weekly, and that has been in the last 10 years a growth area. A lot of communities have seen weeklies like that come up. You've got the New West, the web only piece, trying to do some work in the online space for small towns. And one of the interesting things about New West is some of their revenue, as I understand it, is from what you call arm's length operations. They don't make all their money off the journalism they put on conferences. And I think that's a very important thing about thinking about what it needs to take some journalism. You've got to have some other figures, some other dollars coming in, whether it's a subscription model that you pay for a little more like cable TV, whether you run a coffee shop and you have a business that spins off some profits, but something's got to generate some money. And I think that you're in your local communities, you're more than the most likely place to come up. There are some other things, like someone said, what about NPR? Well, NPR is really a national model. I mean, a third of their money comes from the federal government. You're not going to get that with a newspaper. Foundations, not really, not enough. And not every, you've got a few, but not every town that has a newspaper has a foundation. So you're going to have to come up with that and figure out, help them, your local community, figure out a way to pay for a few journalists. Okay, step number 9. Hey, I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself, I need my glasses. Okay, and this sort of builds off 7, the idea of help. You've got to get out of your mind the news is free. Okay, I'm sorry. It is true that what you see on the internet is free to you, but beyond that, it's not free. Google does not employ one single journalist. What they do is link to every newspaper website that gives away their content for free. There was a piece of brilliance, wasn't it? We pay millions of dollars to journalists, and we say, oh, you know what? We used to have them come to the newspaper, but we'll give it away free. See, journalists weren't business majors after all. But in essence, and this isn't going to be as big an adjustment as you might think. But get it out of your mind: the news is free. News is not free. News is not free. And I think it's an important. It's important because it will allow you. It will allow you to say, I'll put a little bit of $1 or $2 on my mobile bill. It'll allow you, when somebody comes and tries to sell you the e-reader, say, okay, I'll still pay a subscription price. And right in the short run, when the Missoulian sends you the bill and it's up $1 a month, it'll be up $1 a month next month too, because what you're going to have is a lot of cost shifting away from advertising over to the idea that content costs something. And that's okay. It's worth it. Somebody's out there at $12,000 a year sitting through that boring meeting for you. It's okay. But when you hear but they ought to be free, it isn't free. Somebody has to be paid for a very labor-intensive business. Okay, that's number 8. Step number 9. We've got to bring the underclass, the poor, the undereducated along in this country. And this is a little far afield from the particulars of journalism, but it's very critical to the future of democracy. Because the combination of having a very polarized economic system in this country, with the fact that the new media has the potential to swing people who aren't very sophisticated one way or the other. If you don't know what you're doing too much, and all of a sudden you see something online, or if you see something that is, if you Googled it last night and you read something, you didn't check it out, the potential for people being manipulated is pretty great, honestly. If you're not up on this stuff, you are a part of the masses that could be swung either way. And this isn't liberal or conservative. I mean, it could go either way. And if you've got a very sophisticated person who is saying in a democracy, all we got to do is get the masses to swing with us, and those masses are susceptible, it's a concern. And one of the things you have to do, I think, is never forget that this country, in addition to having a wonderful democracy, has had a history of economic advancement for a lot of people. If you go back the last decade, most people in this country have seen their real wages decline about 4%. If you were well off, I got a good job. Mine didn't. Mine went up. But the average American's wage went down 4% in the last 10 years. Well, the potential of losing people out of not just the democracy, but our economic system has a tremendous potential negative impact for these new media, because those people are potentially could be manipulated. And I think it's potentially is a danger. Okay, that's number 9. Step 10, think like the Dalai Lama. Okay? And what I mean by that is, and this was on my mind because he was recently in Memphis, and everyone thinks he is a Buddhist, and you think about Buddhist religion, but his comment, interestingly enough, when he was there, wasn't about religion at all. He said the most important thing for humanity, now, was to have compassion for others. Have compassion for. It doesn't matter if you're religious or non-religious, but there's a moral imperative to care about your fellow man, whether he's a Christian, a Buddhist, a Hindu, a Muslim. There's a moral imperative to care about him if he's black or white or Native American, a moral imperative of rich or poor. And he said the way that you start that is, of course, you start it from within. You start it from within. You have a calmness, you have an inner calm. And you say to yourself, I have a moral imperative to be compassionate, I'm going to have an inner calm. And I'm going to mention this in passing, but one of the things that really does concern me about where we are right now as a country is how much inner calm are you seeing on Fox and CNN right now? I mean, would you say inner calm is the word to describe what you're seeing that's whipping people up? And I just say that there's a part of getting through this transition that comes back to that higher purpose of mankind. I mean, I think you really have to remember the fact that there are people that you love and there are people you care about, and you have that compassion. Because if we don't have that, if we lose that, given all these other concerns we've got, I think that the challenges to keeping a community whole, to keeping ourselves educated, to keeping ourselves committed is very much challenged. You're really lucky that you're in Montana. You all know that? You really are. You're really, as they say in the South, you're blessed. I didn't know about blessing until I got in the South. But if they say bless your heart, that's not a good thing. But otherwise, you're blessed if you're here. You're blessed in that the thing is you do have a strong history of independent journalism here. You have a lot of small towns here. When I was in Red Lodge and all over the state, where they really loved it. They loved the fact that they were serving a little community. That was a very strong piece. You're very blessed by a sense of place. People, when you're from Montana, you're from Montana. You're not trying to be from Tennessee. You're from Montana. You feel good about Montana. That sense of place, I think, is going to get you through a lot of this, what we've talked about, following your passion on guns or abortion or whatever it is. I think remember you're Montana, and that's going to help you, and that people around you are Montanans. I think finally you're blessed with a history of caring for your fellow people. I mean, it's not, and I don't mean by government caring, big government programs, you hear a lot about that. It's not that, it's if you see somebody who's broken down on the side of the road, in Montana, they stop. In Memphis, they lock the doors and speed up. You have a sense that if there's somebody in need, and this is based on, whether it's faith communities or small town life, if somebody's in need, you'll say, well, what can we do to help? If somebody's in trouble, you'll say, look, we'll give them a little room, we'll try to get them some help. I think that's a huge part. And when I go back to Senator Wheeler, this idea that he had that there was no problem so large it couldn't be solved by people getting around the table. That's a very Montana idea. It's something that people, I think, here really feel. And I would say that when I go back to Red Lodge and I go back to the snag, I'm sitting there in the snag and I'm thinking about those times. The thing that got me started in journalism was living in that little Montana town and being very young. And people saying, boy, you're awfully young to be doing this, aren't you? But they came into the office. They took me around. We took a tour of the little mines over in Red Lodge. We went up the Cook City Highway. You got to see this, they'd say. They invited me to go to the Kiwanis Club and play the piano for them. They learned I played the piano. Say, oh, we can sing God Bless America. Can you play that? I said, you betcha. I can play that. And I think that feeling of taking people in was what really made me want to continue in journalism. And it's the thing I really have today. And David McCumber and I were talking earlier that there's a lot of people who've lost their faith in journalism and have gotten out. And I haven't lost my faith. I know Peggy hasn't lost her faith. And our job now is to get through these difficult times and And remember that you have to have an informed citizenry to have a strong democracy. And I think you've got that chance in Montana. So thanks very much. So if anyone would like to ask a question?
Questions?
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Liz Markey, and I chair the board of a new little media company up in the Flathead called the Flathead Beacon. And I have two questions for you. If journalism is not free, what's the business model that's going to sustain it? And the second is, I'd like for you to comment on the whole notion of citizen journalism and the access to opinions of all citizens and the ability of all of us to participate in media.
Yeah. Well, yeah, the first one I think is right upon us, where what's the model if news isn't free. And I think what you're going to see, what you see right now, right before your eyes, is people looking for a way to put a meter on the news. And that's where if you're still subscribing to the newspaper, that's why your subscription price is going up. It used to be about 20% of what newspapers made revenue. It'll go to 50%. It'll be so if you want to read the newspaper, you're going to pay for it, and what you're really paying for is the journalism because the advertising shrunk way down. I mentioned the iPhone. I think mobile very quickly the news that you get on your mobile phone will be charged. People will charge for that in some way. I don't think it's going to be paying for online content per se because that's already free. We're already used to getting that free. So there may be little things like Google Ads. What's one thing, if you Google and Yahoo both know what everyone in this room goes to, what all the sites you visit, and they go to advertisers who'd like to reach people who are looking at Ford pickups, fishing vacations in Montana, and divorce lawyers, let's say. Those are the three things you're searching. Well, they'll go and sell in your market, say, well, let's find the divorce lawyers, the outfitters, and the auto companies and see if they'd like to. We'll clump all those people together in Missoula looking for those three things, and we'll sell an ad to them. So there's a model there. It's not, but here's the problem, okay? And this is the unsolved problem. A newspaper reader, if you're subscribed to the newspaper, the value to an advertiser and to the company, let's take a newspaper company, is that basically for every newspaper reader, a newspaper today can get $700 in subscription dollars and advertising. $700 for every single subscriber. Every online website user in a newspaper generates $50. $700 in print, $50 online. That's the reason why, and I'm not going to steal David's thunder here, but it's a reason why a lot of papers say, well, if we're go online, if we're only making $50 per user, we got to shrink the staff down from 220 or whatever it is. So the answer is there's some things being tried, mobile, e-readers, higher subscription costs for print. There's not an answer. Second thing, citizen journalism has a role. The low end in particular, you don't have to send somebody to the Kiwanis or Rotary Clubs to get the picture of the guy who just got the plaque for giving money to the park. Have the person take the picture at the club and send it to the newspaper, the website, and run it. Great. We've trained people say, well, you got to come and take a picture, and I say, well, you've got a digital camera. You take the picture, send it, and we'll distribute it. And I think that's I think that will happen. As far as the opinions, the biggest issue there that you've got it goes back to thinking like the Dalai Lama. A lot of people who are in the comment section of websites, they're not thinking like the Dalai Lama. They aren't. They've got hateful, racist, reactionary comments, and they fill up the comments on websites. And what that does is people say, I don't want to be part of that. I'm not going to wade into that sewer, so they don't. So you have to find a way to moderate in some ways, I think. Now, people will wade in a little bit, but I think you've got to encourage, probably through moderated comments, a way to get the level of commentary.
But the reality is just like Fox News, the more controversial and the more adversarial the citizen journalism comments are, the more readers you get.
I agree. And maybe I'd say that the issue there is that we don't know because that's the way it's played out. Is there a limit to that? Because some people have a good fist fight and they like to get in and duke it out, but I think a lot of other people don't. And I don't know what happens to them. I don't really know the answer to that question. Would they come in if it was more moderate? I think they might. Other questions? Yes.
Maybe a request and then a question. The request is, please tell me the 20,000 journalists who lost their jobs are the TV people covering Michael Jackson.
Well, some of them did. They really did. But you know, the entertainment news is a niche. I mean, it's not that different from Fox, really. I mean, it's there. You know, you look on your 600 channels. I mean, you know, gee, you've got a lot of. I mean, the trivia and the minutia of, you know, Paris Hilton just goes on and on and on. So
the question would be more along the lines of, what are the prospects for a handful of channels, no longer 3, having a relevance to 40 or 50% of the viewers?
Not good. Not good. What you do have a handful of, see, you have some other niches that are very viable, but they're small. The Economist is a good, you know, it's a high-end example. The New York Times. I mean, the New York Times is going to survive because there are people who love the New York Times, and it'll survive. But I don't think they'll ever have 50%. I can't envision a scenario where a single media outlet will have that. I think together, I mean, I think there's still those events that where everyone will know, you know, a big enough event will capture 50% of the market. But I don't think it's through one media, not for a long, long time. And that's probably good. I just think just got to make sure that all the ones that grow up, that there's we're sorting them a little better than we are. I think that's the confusion I talked about. I think is what's kind of flummoxing a lot of people. Yes.
You mentioned the W. Grace case from last year. I believe that the best reporting on that case is still the reporting that the Seattle Post Intelligencer did 8 or 9 years ago, where you go back on the internet and actually pick up those columns, and there were, I guess, 7 or 8 columns that they did. This is a Seattle paper that dedicated a reporter or several reporters to the Montana issue. With those kinds of, that kind of reporting diminishing, I presume, because of cost cutting and so on, how do we pick that kind of muckraking up again? We can't leave it to Seymour Hersh and the New Yorker or to Mother Jones, because that's kind of global kind of stuff. But how do we get back into...
I think there's a good question, and David, of course, is the guy who's here, was the editor at the PI at the time where a lot of that work was being done. And didn't you write a book about this whole thing?
With the reporter, Andy Schneider.
Yeah.
I was the editor on that project, and Andy's the reporter on the book.
And I just think, I guess major props to David and the PI for that. And what I would say was that, we were talking, I'm not sure it was a golden era, but what you had was tremendously profitable newspapers, and to their credit, some of that profit went back into staff. There's no way in the world that the PI in the last 2 years would have sent somebody over to do that.
One of the interesting things is that the reporter who broke that story, Andy Schneider, is now a web journalist, independent after the PI was ceased publication. He has 3 or 4 other really good stories he wants to report on in the West, dealing with corporations, but he doesn't have libel insurance anymore. And so, I mean, there are a lot of factors that make it very tough to do serious journalism.
There's a way. I'll tell you what I think will happen, and I think this is an encouraging piece. There are a couple of examples now. ProPublica is one, where a private angel investor and some others have said, let's gather together 20 or 30 journalists, investigative journalists, put them under one umbrella, vet the best story ideas, and let them go, and then make that work available for free to other media outlets. Well, a version of that could be done in a regional way. It really could, because what you identified is something people will pay for. If they truly think it's verified and accurate material on an important subject, I think there is probably a market for that. I really do. But it hasn't been tried, because you'd have to find, I mean, honestly, a room like this, we'd have to have a sign-up table out here at the end of it, say, would you be willing to pay $100 a year, $200 a year for this? I'm familiar with a guy up in Northfield, Minnesota, who tried to do that. And what he did was he asked the little town of Northfield to pay for one reporter who would report on the community. And they would. They paid for one. That was an experiment. They paid for her for about a year, and then she went back to grad school, and it was over. But things like, something like that would work. I think it has to still be tied to, what would you say, something that has some legacy value. I wonder if the Missoulian could do it. I mean, I wonder if the Missoulian said, hey, we can't afford an investigative reporter, but there's a box on my bill. Would you pay another $10 a month so we can hire one person to do things? I mean, I don't know, something like that.
I have time probably for one more question.
Yes, sir.
You didn't quite touch specifically on page view digital paper subscriptions. I'm the only person I know that actually subscribes to the Missoulian page view. I know there must be others.
Yeah.
But and what I get for that is
no, it's
I was-
because there are a few vendors out there. PageView's one. There's another outfit called Technavia that does it. There's one called well, they have two or three. And what you discover is it's under 5% of the people who subscribe who at one time were subscribers who will pay for the digital version of the paper. And part of the issue is it's not as friendly. I don't know, is the one you subscribe, is it just a full page and it's been reproduced in a...
It's a Missoulian, and it looks different on a Mac than it does on a PC, but I'm comfortable with it. And I also get a doorstep subscription with that, which I can donate, and I donate it to the VA clinic waiting room, so which tickles me.
Well, I think you're on. I mean, I think that market will grow. I think particularly if what you read in that digital format is designed for that. And the New York Times has this thing called Times Reader that if you subscribe to any edition of the New York Times, you get it for free. It's an example of something that's much more readable. And there are a few others around the country. I think that could help with, I'm glad that you're doing, but I think with, the next generation, I think that would be an experience that would go. That's really when I was talking about the e-reader and the reading it on here, that's really what I was talking about. I mean, you don't have to read the e-reader on an effort device. You can read it on a laptop if it was designed to work just fine. So I think there's some promise there.
I mean, I get the exact...
Right, it's exactly
with
right.
the ads, which is one of the things I like.
Well, the ads are very important. Okay, right here, last question.
You spoke a lot, Robin Ascage, I'm on the Wheeler board, you spoke a lot about the demise of the print newspaper, but I know a lot of times I have a hard time finding the local television news on my local TV station. It's all just cable news, cable news. What do you see about the future of local broadcasting?
Local broadcasting, I'm not here to speak on their behalf. I can tell you they've actually been hurt worse than newspapers in terms of revenue drop and news coverage because their staffs were small and now they're even smaller. Well, here's what I think is going to happen. I would say that actually it's in the broadcast television arena where this idea of collectively supporting a group of journalists who maybe are broken off from the company and are just operating as a journalistic pod in the community, that's what might happen. So what you would have is 4 videographers, 5 reporters, and a couple of producers who work in town and they sell their content to the print TV stations. And I think if you could get the libel insurance and medical insurance, it would happen tomorrow. Because what that would do would be break the terribly outdated pay structure in TV. I don't know the history of Missoula, but you saw this. I'm sure many of you saw the story last week where Katie Couric's salary is bigger than the whole NPR news budget. She gets paid $15 million, and NPR's news budget is about $12 million. Well, that's stupid in today's era. But that's in most markets. In Spokane, the best paid guys were the weather broadcasters. You don't need to do that. You got the Weather Channel. Go watch your Weather Channel. Don't spend that money and have a small pool of journalists report. It's been talked about. There's some antitrust issues, but I think you'll see that in 5 years. Well, again, thank you all.